Hello, everyone. Hello and welcome to Alta Live. My name is Beth Spotswood. I'm the digital editor of Alta Journal, and I am so excited to welcome you to today's conversation with activist and organizer Joe Garcia on the housing issues facing California farm workers. If you didn't already know the vital importance of farm workers in the West and specifically California, you are about to learn about that. If you already think you know a lot about it, you're going to learn some more. The concept of Alta Live, our show today, is to take an article or subject from the magazine and expand on it in a live interview. Today, we're going to dive deeper into an article by award-winning Alta Journal contributor Lydia Lee on the housing issues facing California's farm workers. The current issue of Alta Journal has a huge section on housing. It's called Gimme Shelter. One of those articles focused specifically on the housing issues facing our agricultural workers. And that's what we're going to talk to Joe about today. A bit about Joe Garcia, born in Mercedes, Texas, but grew up in the community of King City, California, where he worked throughout his childhood in the fertile lands of the Salinas Valley. He comes from a farm worker family himself. He would travel from Texas to California following the harvest. He's a graduate of Fresno State and became a farm labor contractor, starting Jaguar Farm Labor Contracting in 2005. Today, Joe is the owner of various companies in California and during peak season employs over 4,000 farm workers throughout the state. He is also the president and founder of the California Valley Farmworkers Foundation, a nonprofit whose mission is to serve and support Central Valley farm workers by providing programs and services to better their quality of life. He's got some exciting things to explain and talk about in terms of the housing issues specifically facing our farm workers. Before we dive into our conversation, if you are new to Alta Live, we are the digital interview series here at Alta Journal. Alta is an award-winning quarterly magazine focused on California and the West. We put out 4 big, beautiful issues like this every year. I hope you'll check them out. Here's Lydia's article, How to Grow Good Housing, that features Joe's expertise as well as many other voices. Photos by our great Penny Gladstone in here. We do free weekly events like this, free newsletters, a free California book club. We offer a print subscription along with a hat and a book for $50 a year. Join us online for as little as $3 a month, or just check out our free content, fall in love with us, and maybe one day you'll subscribe. But thank you so much for joining us today and checking us out. This interview will be recorded and posted to altaonline.com later this afternoon. There is a Q&A button at the bottom of the screen to ask questions for our guest. Joe and I will chat for about 30 minutes and then get to as many of those questions as we can. Check your email later on today. We're going to send you links to this interview, Lydia's article, Joe's work with California farm workers, and anything else that pops up today. Thanks to my wonderful colleague, Jess Blau, who is also on this call. So with that, it is so great to see where our audience is zooming in from today. Please do let us know. Hi, Encinitas. Please do let us know where you're zooming in from in the chat. Joe, I am in Novato, California today, Northern California. Where are you zooming in from?
I am in Delano, California today, the center of the best table grapes in the world.
Okay, noted.
We're at peak harvest right now. We got a little damage from Hurricane Hillary, which has displaced about 5,000 farm workers right now.
Oh, wow.
The crop was ruined, because of the storms. So that's another issue that we're dealing with besides housing, is loss of work.
Yeah, no, well, and I'm sure, this is a gigantic issue considering the size of California's agricultural industry and its reliance on farm workers to keep us all fed. I want to talk specifically, obviously, about housing, as that's what Lydia's article focused on. And one of the things, the kind of quote from you that really stood out to me was that housing is the biggest issue facing California's farm workers. And that surprised me because there seemed to be a number of issues facing California farm workers. In fact, coming up, I did some research on you, and I know that border control is a huge issue the undocumented workers' fear of deportation. So there's healthcare, there's a living wage, a number of huge issues. Can you talk to us specifically about the housing situation for California's farm workers, what it has been like in the past and what it's like right now?
Well, I think you've seen during COVID, you heard a lot of stories. The Hispanic community got hit, one of the hardest hit populations uh, from COVID. It was because you have 2 and 3 families living in one house or a house in a garage, or renting out garages spaces for $1,000 for a garage space without a kitchen or anything. We've collected data and been, because I work in so many areas throughout the state, and we've collected data through the foundation in Coachella, Santa Maria area, Napa, and the whole Central Valley about farm worker needs. And number one came up, and we asked them, "What do you need? How can we help you?" And it was housing, with English as a second language and immigration as other topics, but affordable housing. Uh, as we know as a nation, I think it's an issue, but for farm workers, they're having to drive to find affordable housing maybe an hour away from where they work. Uh, I'll take, for instance, I have vineyards that I provide labor to in Paso Robles, California. People drive from Avenal an hour away. I have work in Napa. People drive from Fairfield 45 minutes to an hour and a half, depending on traffic. Uh, so those are, we drive all the way down to Arvin. The Central Valley is probably the most affordable housing in California, and we have a large population that provides, labor to this area. But it's always about affordable housing. Rents are going up. People aren't qualifying for low income anymore because wages are going up, and they're being displaced. So one of those areas I looked at, and we always discuss with our politicians, is how can we make affordable housing affordable for farm workers? They're living on a 15.50 minimum wage. That's why you have 2 or 3 family members working to provide for the household, to provide for the bills. Added on to all the utilities that are going on, it's just getting worse, not better. You saw that situation in Half Moon Bay. Luckily, a lot of that, it doesn't happen often, but that was terrible. That Half Moon Bay.
Can you recap that for that? Lydia's article starts with this, but for those that haven't been able to read the article yet, Joe, can you just briefly recap the tragedy that happened at a mushroom farm in Half Moon Bay?
Yes, a farm worker with mental issues, or we don't know, shot 3 or 4 farm workers on the properties that he was working at from anger or something. From that, they discovered where these farm workers were living. They were living in squalid conditions because that's all they could afford, living in Half Moon Bay. I myself looked at labor in Half Moon Bay. I was approached by a grower about bringing labor there, and I said people would have to drive an hour and a half to 2 hours. I think minimal rates are $2,500 to $4,000 to rent a 1-bedroom apartment in the Half Moon Bay area. Just ridiculous prices that are just unaffordable. And from those squalid conditions came out the stories that were the terrible living conditions, the outdoor kitchens, that living in a container, terrible conditions. And that happens in other areas also. We don't want that to happen, but that's all they could afford to live. Maybe they didn't have a car, they carpool too, and they have to, that's their only carpool, is that person that lives in that area. So that was a tragic story. And those are some of the, there's many. Coachella, the same way you have a mobile home park in Coachella. The story came out of LA Times a week ago, where they live in a mobile home park, but none of them have air conditioning. They all live with swamp coolers. And I was there on Monday, and it was 120 degrees. A swamp cooler doesn't work in 120 degrees, but those people have acclimated, and you have elderly with health issues, diabetic, cholesterol, and it just adds to their health issues, that heat. So Santa Maria area, we have people used to migrate. Now they don't migrate. They stay in those areas. We don't have a migratory workforce anymore.
What do you mean by that anymore? Because I want to clarify what a migrant worker is, or a seasonal worker, and how that works. If I'm coming to California to be an agricultural worker, am I just working? Do I hook up with an organization like yours to find work, and ideally decent conditions to live in, and then go from crop to crop? Like how does seasonal farm work?
There's 2 different types. One is the normal person that lives here. that is in the United States and lives here somewhere in the United States. They come and follow the crops. They're looking for housing, and or they're living in hotels or apartments or a room they rent. And then there's the other one, H2A, which is a contracted worker, where the grower contracts the labor from Mexico and he has to provide housing. So those are two different subjects. So the farm workers that are contracted get housing. The ones that domestic have to find housing. So what has happened in the past 5 years, California has gone to a larger H2A population. So the apartments and the hotels that these migrant farm workers used to be able to find, now they're being taken over or bought by these H2A contract labor providers. So that means rents are going up and there's less places to live in every area of the state.
If
Because
you're not an H-2A visa holder.
correct.
How do you get, is it difficult to get an H-2A visa for a
Uh,
farm
there no in Mexico, growers or contractors will be in Mexico recruiting people, and there's a list, and they come back year after year. And normally with the growers, it's the same people come back to the same ranch, or the same commodity. Every commodity is different. It might be or in the Central Valley, it's oranges where there's a huge H2A population. On the coast, it's strawberries, vegetables. Recently up in Napa, the wine grape industry is looking into that more because of the shortage of labor. Uh, so they want guaranteed labor on their properties to make sure they harvest their crop, do all the jobs before the harvest, the thinning, the tipping, the leafing, the weeding. You need a year-round workforce now. It's just not seasonal. Uh,
And so if you have an H-2A visa, that worker is supposed to be guaranteed certain things like affordable and safe housing, a living wage, basic medical care,
and
healthy
transportation.
food.
Yeah. It's part of the contract where a domestic worker, they have it more difficult, I think, than a H2A contracted worker in finding housing in different areas. So that's why you don't see a lot of people traveling. They go live in an area. Once they get here, they stay in that area anywhere in the country. I don't care if it's the Midwest, New York, East Coast. You saw a migration towards California and the rest of the country when Ron DeSantis started enforcing immigration policies, or saying that if you're not documented, we're going to, deport you, or you're not going to be able to work, and fining employers $10,000 an employee if they employed an undocumented worker. And you saw an exodus of workers, not only in agriculture, but construction and hotel leave the state of Florida because of those immigration policies. You could see, on fields not being picked, farmers losing their crop, people not getting the food that's supposed to get to their table, prices going up because fruit and vegetables weren't getting picked and let to rot in the ground. And they started coming out here to look. I mean, I had El Salvadoran people and Colombian people that came from Florida looking for work up in Napa, and they couldn't find housing. They were living out of a car because they couldn't find housing in the Napa area, and they were new to the area.
And these crops, I mean, I'm thinking of ways to kind of connect our audience who isn't in agriculture to kind of understand how these issues of farm workers who we need to work in the agricultural industry, how that and their housing problems and the array of other problems that they face, how that directly impacts someone like me who doesn't work there but is shopping at Safeway and is on a budget. And can you talk a little bit about how the rest of us are seeing the
effects
the effects, yes, of those problems?
Prices are going up with wages, utilities. Workers are looking to their farmers to help support financially. More money and increase in wages, with that ripple effect affects food prices, wine prices, meat prices, dairy prices. Everything's going up as wages go up. The rent's going up, and it's a ripple effect from inflation. And farmers, everyone, it'll reach the consumer. One of my growers, because of this grape shortage right now, because of the devastation in the table grape industry today, there's a supply and demand. He raised his box price $5. So you're going to be paying that. That will affect you at the grocery store when you're putting that bag of grapes per pound on the. It'll go from $3.99 to $6.99 a pound, and you're going to have to make a decision whether you're going to buy something that's not a necessity, a fruit, a grape, or your meat, dairy, and bread that you really eat every day, depending on your diet. how is that affecting, the farm worker? It When it's seasonal, every area has a different season. The Salinas Valley and Central Coast are veggie season. They will be harvesting vegetables until November, and then all those farm workers or the work leaves, and they go to Arizona for the Arizona Yuma season, and that goes from December all the way to March. So you have a migratory force that goes over there, and the people here are, looking for work, living off of unemployment if they're documented. If you're not documented, you don't get unemployment, and you have to search for other work. And sometimes other bills go unpaid because they're paying their rent. They won't pay their utility. They won't pay their car payment. They won't pay. They'll see what's the most important bill I got to pay. And number one is my house. After
Sure.
that, they're making calls or looking for other resources. And they during COVID, we were getting 300 to 400 calls a day for assistance on rental assistance, food assistance, because no one was working. And people were luckily, we had eviction restrictions and everything. They could stay in their properties. But now that those restrictions are getting taken off by the state of California, you're seeing people getting evicted, and farm workers getting evicted and other people getting evicted out of their housing because now that rents are going up, they were at a set rent. They can't afford the new rent. Maybe it was $1,500. Now it's $2,000 because of inflation and, wages going up and everything. And they can't afford that. I have an employee that she was in government assisted housing paying 800. Now she's not qualified for that, and she's paying $2,000 for a 3-bedroom house where she was paying $800 before with government assisted funding. So it's just not affordable.
Before we move on, I want to touch on something because folks are pointing out in the chat here a little bit more about H2A. 2 questions on that. The first is there are, according to one of our viewers, well-documented exploitive aspects of the H2A system, that it is not perfect, that people are, organizations, some organizations are denouncing it because they're taking advantage of farm workers. The other question I have that it kind of counterbalances that is, if this program provides a living wage, they're required to provide housing, healthcare, healthy food, why isn't everyone trying to get in, domestic workers included, trying to get H2A visas?
Because they live here. They don't qualify. That's one. You have to be in a foreign country, and there's certain countries that are on that H2A visa approval. They can be from the Philippines, Somalia, other areas, and they can apply. If a grower wants to go recruit those people from different countries, they can go to those countries and recruit all over those countries that are authorized to provide H2A workers.
But if you're already here, you can't get in?
No, that's
even if you're undocumented?
Even if you're undocumented. You have to be in Mexico, and then the government will vet all the permissions and the permits in Mexico before you cross over. And it's not a minimum wage. They are paid an average prevailing wage, which is better than the domestic wage. They make $18.65 an hour minimum.
And what's the domestic wage?
$15.50 in California right now, minimum wage.
So they even an undocumented worker gets minimum wage, which they pay full taxes on, just like documented employees, correct. Anyone. Okay, and there are ways in which farmers or certain organizations are able to exploit the H2A program.
I don't deal with growers that don't treat their farm workers right. That's point number one. Number two, to answer the question, I have read the articles on exploitation. I've seen that. I've seen it across the country. You read the stories. Our own worst enemy is our own culture. When I read a story, I think it was out of Texas or North Carolina, where they exploited the workers, took away their permits, and said it were terrible conditions. So I've seen the stories, and I'm appalled as you guys are on hearing that side of the story. It's sad. People come here to work a living wage, and people take advantage. And we hope we turn those people in and arrest them and put them in jail for taking advantage of these hardworking farm workers that are essential to our economy.
Right. I don't want to dive too much into, I realize someone wants to, this does beg for a more nuanced discussion on the H2A, which is a gigantic thing. And we don't have time for that today. And perhaps one day Alta will be able to better explore that. But Joe, let's move on to housing specifically. There was a lot of, there were a lot of examples in Lydia's article about kind of barracks housing or dorm style type housing that would be offered at a much lower rate for farm workers. I want to talk about kind of outside the box solutions in terms of people having to live at hotels, rent garages, live in overcrowded, severely overcrowded conditions, or just completely unacceptable conditions like in Half Moon Bay. Can you talk just about the dormitory style housing, kind of more of a communal housing that exists in some farm worker communities?
Oh, yes. Mostly it's male dominated. That's the sad thing about it, because there's a lot of families that come here crossing legally or illegally, and they bring their families. They want their families to be with them. Napa County, I think, Napa Valley has 3 or 4 facilities where they provide for, I don't know the amount, but the growers participate in that. They pay so much per acre, and the county, and it's a joint project to provide farm worker housing. It's on a first come, first served basis. It's like living in a college dorm. You have dorm facilities, showers, bathrooms, and 3 meals a day. But it's first come, first serve, and it's all male population. 2 males per room. Minimum requirements, I think, are 100 or 50 square feet per person to living space.
Jeez.
50 square feet per person. That's
What about
government regulations.
female farm workers?
Uh, from what I see in those dorm type and H2A, we have very few females that come across and live in those dormitories. I've never seen any in the with the H2A contractors or the facilities they provide that where there's females that are coming to work on H2A visas. There might be, I just have not come across them.
But you mentioned that you're seeing an increase in female workers. Where do they live?
They probably live with their families and in housing in the area, apartments or houses, or 2 or 3 families to a house.
Jeez. So you see solutions to this. I mean, there have to be solutions to this. California provides an extraordinary amount of the country's food. And people the people who help provide that food need safe places to live, need places to live. One of the solutions that you came up with that Lydia mentioned in the article was getting trailers from movie sets, moving those to farm communities and I think it was like a Tyler Perry movie had used these trailers, and you were trying to find a way to get these now unused trailers to California to house undocumented or to house farm workers. What are other kinds of solutions? First of all, did that work?
There's political tape with everything. So we're still waiting on HCD to approve them. We bought 14 modular units that have 7 studio suites in each, fully furnished, full bathrooms, televisions, dressers, everything. From Georgia, Tyler Perry used them during COVID, created a COVID camp for his movie production studio during COVID and the housing issues we were having. We reached out and they were available. So we brought them here. They're on 16 acres of property I have here in Delano, California, and we're just waiting for the permit process to finalize. We also purchased, me and a few partners, a hotel out in Buttonwillow for farm workers, and remodeled it and everything to make it livable housing conditions. So it was a good idea, but at that point, farm workers didn't come because now crops are getting devastated, and so they don't want to live in Buttonwillow. They're living closer to Delano or other areas because that's an hour-and-a-half ride from Buttonwillow to here to work. So they're looking for areas closer to work in, and there's no very much agriculture in Buttonwillow, California. Avenal, California, a farm worker community, they're building farm worker housing, but what they're having issues with is getting construction workers to travel an hour-and-a-half to go build homes, the utilities, the infrastructure, the self-help groups, Proteus, that help build low-income farm worker housing. They budgeted with USDA funds or government funds, but now over the past 3 years, they're under budget. The cost have increased 30%, and now they're underfunded to provide those housing projects. So now they have to go back to the government and say, we need more funding because wood's gone up, everything's gone up after COVID. And so those houses are sitting there waiting for more funding to be finished. So there are programs that are trying to help, but it's getting the infrastructure, getting through the political red tape to get these done in a timely manner.
What do you see as a larger scale solution if you could pick your dream, if you were in charge of the California state budget as it pertains to agriculture, farm worker, housing, etc., what do you see as a large scale solution to the farm worker housing issue?
Subsidized housing, uh, cost effective housing for them. 1550 is not a livable wage. I agree 100%. The average wage, probably with bonuses, a box bonus, a piece rate bonus, is $18 to $20 in our area. Every area is different. Every area's wages are different, but make it affordable housing for that area, and assistance, apartment complexes that are farm worker friendly, and they have all the necessities for a farm worker. More of those solutions, uh, and use. We have all kinds of funds you're seeing for homelessness. What about the farm workers that provide the food also? We're concentrating on which is a big issue. Homelessness is huge, but also the people that feed us are a huge part of this world and nation. And hopefully, we get a lot of calls from politicians and everything, to help, but it's the follow through to make it happen that we need, and to get together as communities and support these farm workers that are feeding us. We knew they were essential before COVID. That's when
Right.
the essential farm worker came up. They're essential every day, and we support them. I mean, my companies, we're out there every day. They're our family. I've been here with one of my growers for 26 years. They're my family. The farm workers, we're a partnership. Without, we all survive together. So when one hurts, we all hurt.
So in terms like subsidized housing, totally makes sense. Are other programs necessary? I mean, I'm wondering about childcare, about health insurance, or vital health care. I imagine that all of the stuff that we rely on either from our employers or pay for independently. I imagine that really pops up. Childcare is a huge expense in my life, and I imagine it affects your farm workers.
Oh, definitely. I mean, a child care center, there's not enough child care providers,
Right.
and they mostly take them to unlicensed child care providers. So I don't know what the going rate is, $20 a day or $30 a day per child. Uh, and when you have three little ones, that's $60 a day. It might not be worth it to go work because, at a minimum wage, you're paying more for child, like you said, child care is expensive. Uh, and along again, if you don't have a car, you're paying for a carpool ride, $10 a gas a day, plus your child care. And then the medical, if you're not documented, you can't get medical care. So you're going to, hopefully there's programs and doctors and that take Medi-Cal or will charge you a $40 doctor visit instead of the 50 or 75 that they normally charge if you have insurance. And there are low income clinics that do that provide for undocumented
Sure.
workers and try to provide costly healthcare, efficient healthcare. But then you got 50 people after work at the doctor's office waiting to be seen for a 5-minute visit, and that's it. Then now you don't get quality healthcare because there's so many people needing healthcare at that office after work, at that
And
doctor.
presumably you lose a few hours of work if
Correct.
for an office worker to be like, I got a dentist appointment, I'll be out for a couple of hours. They're losing that 15 or $18 an hour.
Correct. And then that's why they have to wait till after work to go to the doctors.
That is so vital. I hate to put you on the spot in terms of numbers, but do you have any kind of ballpark of what percentage of California's farm workers are undocumented?
The number grows every day. Our documented population is aging out, and anybody that's crossing under 30 years old that is probably undocumented. I'd say 30 to 40%.
Wow.
That's a number for me. Uh, in different areas of the state, it's different for me. Here in the Central Valley area, that number is probably closer to 20%. It's lower because we have a workforce that's been here for decades, lived here. Their children, their grandchildren, their great grandchildren are here now. They put their children through college,
Yeah.
and the next generation, they're striving for their next generation not to be in the fields. They want them to go to college. They want them to succeed and have a better life than being a farm worker or working harder than a farm worker. And so that that number is increasing every year as far as undocumented, even here in this valley. But right now, I can say where I'm at in Delano, California, it may be 20%, but in I'd say Santa Maria, it's 50%, 60%. In Napa, I'm looking at 30, 40%. Every area of the state is different.
I did a little recon on you, and there was an article that came up about another issue facing farm workers. In 2016, when Donald Trump was elected, there was a great fear of undocumented farm workers from to show up at work due to fear of deportation. So in addition to all of the other, living concerns, just basic quality of life concerns, there was the issue of fear of who was in charge. Has that dissipated at all in the past few years? Have you seen a relaxation of the farm workers just in terms of a different administration?
Yes, definitely. I mean, you couldn't get people to leave the area to travel to another area to work. You have job. They were scared to travel, scared to go to the doctor, scared to go to a grocery store. Our foundation held immigration meetings at schools where 300 people would show up to know their rights and to make, what to say, what not to say. Don't answer the door if they're, get a warrant or, asking. We were educating people on what not to say, what to say, whether or not to answer your door. There was fear. There was fear of deportation. No one knew what Donald Trump with his rhetoric was going to do. And so that's what 7 years ago when the foundation started. And that was our first big educational process, was having immigration meetings on what to say in the different areas we serve. And we partnered with school districts to use their schools, and they allowed us because it's 99%, Hispanic farm worker community. Less than 1% are Caucasian or other race in farm worker communities.
That's fascinating. Okay, so I realize we're running out of time and I have 8,000 questions for you, but I feel like perhaps a super important one is, what can the rest of us do to support your work, to support California's farm workers? How can we help?
Talk to your politicians. Let them know how important they are. They make policy. Sometimes they make policy, they think they're improving farm workers' lives, but they haven't asked the farm worker. I consistently make calls to our legislators. Come visit them, talk to them, hear them, let them tell your story. I can't tell their story the way they can. And sometimes the narrative is, no, the agriculture is controlling the narrative. You're a puppet for the grower. No, when we've gone to Sacramento, we go up there with no script and let farm workers talk to the politicians and tell them about their struggles, be it with, gang violence in the area, mental health, housing, income, immigration. With our federal legislators also, we do that. We call them, come to the fields, come to the vineyards. They want to see you. They watch television every night. They know the news. They're very educated when it comes to politics. So when we bring politicians, they ask the hard questions. They do. It starts with government. We have to put the word out to the government to help with programs in every area of the state of California. We would love to be a national organization, but California is a country in itself. So the California Farmworker Foundation, we've asked to grow in different areas. We're strategically growing. We're in the Central Valley, all the way from Madera to the Grapevine, Coachella, Santa Maria, and we've been asked to go to the other areas where there's a great agricultural population, but we have strategic growth plans. Once we have a plan in one area, until we set our footprint there, then we move on to another area. And right now, Santa Maria, we're in our second year there, and our footprint is growing. Once we get our programs, our housing, the data collected to see what the needs are, then we'll move on to another area. But if you live in a certain area, support farm workers, support their causes, support food drives, clothing drives. They're all necessities, the basic necessities that we take for granted every day. They don't. They're working hard.
It's so interesting how, of all of those issues, I realize that housing is an issue that faces so many of us, especially in the West, but of all of those issues facing farm workers, you've really established that housing is the top priority, the top crisis, which is powerful. I know how busy you are. You're hopping from meeting to meeting today, and I'm so grateful, Joe, for you taking the time to share your expertise and opinion and perspective with us, because this is such an important issue. It is an important article Again, Lydia Lee wrote in our current issue. We're going to send you a link to it today. I thank you so much, Joe Garcia.
Thank you for having me.
For joining us. Folks, please, before you go, I'm excited to invite, again, this has been recorded. It'll be posted online if you missed any part of it, or do share this information with friends, anyone you think might be interested, as well as Lydia's article. We'll send you links to all of that, as well as an invitation to, we're having a party tomorrow night at Chevalier's Books in LA. Everyone's invited to that. We'll have some readers from Alta Journal there, pour a little wine, and do some exciting readings from the magazine. I also want to invite you next week. Journalist and author Julia Flynn Seiler will join us to talk about her voyage to the Arctic Circle in kind of to follow in the footsteps of a California pioneer, as well as examine the direct effects of climate change in the Arctic and how it impacts us here in California. So with that, Joe Garcia, thank you again for joining us, and to our audience, thank you. Take care, everyone.